welcome to, let's call it a YouTube special, or is it too much? Yeah. Um, anyway, it's my first video on camera, um, and for those of you who might be asking, what I do call myself, well, it's originally Croy Malta, but go for crew, whatever, whatever fits your fancy. Takes your fancy, sorry. Anyway, I'm basically doing this video partially in response. Well, it is a response video actually, not technically to one person via another. Basically, it follows through a video by Creaky Blinder. Smart fellow, I'll tell you that. But yeah, this response is not to Creaky Blinder. It's actually in response to this fellow.
This video is for everyone who has ever bought an airline ticket.
Well, I've bought an airline ticket.
And so have I. Okay, so yeah, as the title says, the original video is... Sorry for that, Creaky. The original video is... it goes basically about the idea that, aircraft actually work on compressed air, and that they don't really use jet fuel, or if they do, it's very little, etc, etc. Basically it's a whole conspiracy theory centered around the idea that people are being duped into paying more. Well, isn't that a recurring theme among conspiracy theorists? Anything that that in their opinion is is a bit too much, it instantly becomes a conspiracy theory. It's almost as if they want the cake and eat it in every aspect of life. But yeah, that aside. So before I actually delve into the subject, there was a part in that video in which our dear friend Creaky was a bit unsure. Well, let me put his mind at rest about that particular detail. I'm basically referring to the part in which the original poster, anyway, the original author of the video stated that there's something fishy about jet fuel trucks. That they pull next to the aircraft sometimes, and you see, sometimes, not always, sometimes you see them pulling next to the aircraft, connecting to the fuel tank in the ground. You see them connecting a fuel pump to the ground, they connect the other fuel pump to the wing, and they start refueling the aircraft. And this guy says, okay, what's the whole deal about that? So to and Creaky does try to explain that, but well, he is the modest type, and he doesn't try to explain what he is not that much sure about, which is perhaps the best approach for most conspiracy theorists out there. Hint, hint, wink, wink. Yeah, I tried to do a wink there. But yeah, basically, what you get at airports when it comes to refueling, it's two types of fuel trucks that you will get in the large airports. Okay, typically small airports, or even international airports that don't handle that much traffic, or aren't designed to handle large aircraft such as the A380, such as the one that you're seeing on your screens here. they only feature the Bowser type. Okay, that's basically a truck that can vary in size from country to country, depending on the make and model of the truck. But anyway, that's what you will most commonly see. Bowser type. So it's got the Bowser filled with fuel, and it refuels the aircraft via via pump attached to the Bowser, transferred by a pump, etc., etc. That's the most common. However, you also get the other type of aircraft refueling truck, which can come in two configurations: either a Bowser and dual pump, or simply a pumping truck. Now, for the dual pump truck, you get it has a Bowser. Usually it's not that big, and it contains a good amount of fuel in there. But when it comes to refueling large aircraft, and that's the reason why you use these kind of trucks, you basically need to tap into a lot more fuel, simply because what you've got in that Bowser truck is not enough to fill the aircraft. So it taps into the I say taps. The crew basically connects the truck to the underground fuel tank. I was looking for it. I was going to say fuel storage, but yeah, it is fuel storage as well. Basically, there's an underground fuel tank right beneath the pavement. Of course, it's the same thing you get with a fuel pumping station for cars. Only it's more reinforced, etc., etc., and bigger and larger. Because here we're dealing with aircraft. And the truck uses its pumps to, one, pump fuel into the aircraft, and two, replenish its supply of fuel from the underground fuel tank. Now, it can either feature a fuel tank, which kind of gets things started, using already onboard fuel, or a simple pump truck, which basically uses a pump to siphon fuel from sorry, excuse me about that, to siphon fuel from beneath the ground, that that's stored in the fuel tank, fuel tank, below the ground, directly into the aircraft. Now, the reason why you don't just connect a hose from the ground to the aircraft directly is because you don't have the pump in the aircraft or onto the ground. Onto the aircraft, it's extra weight, because you only need it when you're refueling. When you're in flight, that's extra weight. That's weight that you really don't want to have. The number one cardinal rule with aircraft is the lighter the better, because it will need less fuel, it will consume less, and therefore you will run into less and less costs. It just comes as simple as that. Secondly, having a pump present at every point on the ramp, on the on the airport's ramp, just doesn't make sense either, because one, that's a whole lot of pumps to have, which means more and more maintenance, more and more costs, etc., etc., as well as having those pumps exposed to the dangers of being subjected to unnecessary temperature changes, as the ground heats up and cools down. Also variable stress and tension from aircraft moving above it. So yeah, the most logical, simple, and effective means to refuel a large aircraft in that case would be to use a pump truck. You just bring the pump, connect it to the ground, connect it to the plane, and let the pump do what the pump does. Simple as that. So here we have the first claim shot down. This guy goes on to claim that just because you only see one truck at any time, it doesn't make sense because this is a large aircraft. It holds he says that it's claimed that it holds a whole lot of fuel, tons and tons of it, in fact, which is true. He says it doesn't make sense to have just that one fuel truck, but in actual fact, yeah, I just explained why it makes sense to have just that truck. Also, when an aircraft is trying to refuel, it's never refueling from a dry tank. Actually, tanks. Now, sometimes you will get aircraft doing what is known as tankering. Basically, the aircraft would be filled with extra fuel on board, which sometimes can be enough to last for not just the outgoing trip but also the inbound trip. Which means that that the aircraft wouldn't need to refuel when they are so if they're going from point A to point B and back to point A, you refuel at point A. You do what's known as tankering, so you take on extra fuel, you fly from point A to point B, you don't refuel at point B, and you fly back to point A. That is also a let's call it a trick in the industry that's used, and there are a few reasons for it. Chief of which is the fact that maybe fuel from point B would be much more expensive than from point A, so it would be best to just load that extra fuel and use that. Of course, the negative effect of that is that you will run into extra costs because the aircraft is carrying extra weight. So you will end up also burning a bit more fuel, so you have to compensate for that. But yeah, it's a method that's used, and usually that is the reason why. Another reason why is also the lack of facilities. So if at the airport at point B doesn't have adequate facilities, either doesn't have the truck type that's needed, or it can only supply a small amount of fuel at a time, whatever the reasons. But basically, anything that falls under the category of lack of facilities will basically fit this bill and result in the most sensible decision being that of tankering. So yeah, another point, an aircraft will never be refueling from a fully empty hold. On to the next point that this guy goes on to mention is the actual weight of it, and he seems to struggle to understand how an aircraft as big as the A380 can take such a large load of fuel and passengers and still fly. Well, if you do what he did and you just break it down to numbers and you stop there, you will be inclined to, you know, to be equally impressed, to say the least, as well as finding it hard to understand how this big beast gets off the ground, and yet it does. He seems to struggle to understand how an aircraft that weighs, if I'm not mistaken, he goes on to mention, yeah, I'm going to cycle quite fast in this video. Oh, no, I've definitely gone beyond. I'm sure I see the figures. Yeah, that's where. Okay, he goes on to mention 260 metric tons, which is in the actual measurement. Sorry, which is in the actual weight, but yeah, whatever, you know, potato, tomato, tomato. Okay. It's still a large figure, and it's still going to be a large figure. Now, first point before we delve into the actual figures, this guy only takes into account the wings, the tanks present in the wings. And yes, each wing does act as a tank, but he seems to forget that the aircraft also has another tank or two. I'm not sure about the Airbus, but typically airliner aircraft would have 3 tanks. 2 tanks, one being in each wing, and the other tank being located down below in the fuselage. Okay. With some aircraft it's just 3 tanks. On some aircraft, and I'm not sure if the A380 is configured like this, but I do know that on some large aircraft you do get 4 tanks. So I get 1 in each wing, a third one being in the center forward fuselage, and the 4th one being in the center rear of the fuselage. And just a side note, I've already mentioned this in some of my flight simming videos. Fuel loadout on an aircraft is done by first refueling the wings and then the fuselage tanks. The usage of fuel, on the other hand, the burning of fuel, is done by first burning what's stored in the fuselage, and next moving on to the wings. It all has to do with the fuselage, the fuel providing the necessary stability for wings. You know, basically helping the wing structure withstand the stresses of flight and landing. So that's important to keep in mind. So yeah, the aircraft is never refueling from empty, and that's the fuel tank layout. Now, our conspiracy theorist goes on to say that, you know, there's hundreds and hundreds of tons of fuel weight being pumped into an aircraft as big as this. And he seems to struggle to understand how that doesn't impede the aircraft from taking off, cruising whatever distance it needs to cruise, and landing safely, might I add. Well, he even brings some, you know, good examples, I would say.
There's a fuel
compares, yeah.
in each.
So he compares. Sorry, I pressed that too early. He compares that you've got, you know, that this amount of fuel equals, you know, an X amount of elephants on each wing and X amount of London buses on each wing. Yeah, sure, fine. And you know what? It's not a problem. The aircraft itself, its dry weight, okay, is already in the hundreds of tons. Add to that passengers, and mind you, passengers add weight as well. So if you're flabbergasted at the fact that that fuel is overloading the aircraft, wait until you consider also the weight of the passengers. Now, taking conservative figures, mind you, I'm recording actually this video from Malta, and here we use the metric system. Okay, so if you're watching this from the US, do your own conversions. Whatever figures I got in terms of kilograms, yeah, in terms of metric measurements, I'm using metric measurements. Whatever figures I got and were available only in pounds, I couldn't give a rat's ass of converting them, but yeah, whatever. Anyway, yeah. So taking conservative figures for every passenger, typically it's assumed that one passenger is equal to about 70 kilograms worth of weight. Now, yes, some will be weighing below that amount, especially babies and children. Some will weigh more than that. In very extreme cases, even double or sadly even more. But as an average, it works out. It plays out well. It plays out fine, because when you start compensating in between the weight differences, the average kind of tends to stick somewhere around the 70 or 80 kilogram mark. So let's just assume that every passenger weighs about 70 kilograms. Okay. Now this aircraft can take about 250 something passengers. Sorry. It's actually 850 something. Yeah, I'm so used to flight simming with medium airliners that I forgot that we're talking about the A380 here. So yeah, it's around the 850 something, but in this video he goes on to state a 900 loadout. Well, he says that in the area of 900. So let's take 900 as a figure. So we've got 70 kilogram weighing passengers, and there's 900 of them. That's basically around 60,000, 62,000. Actually did the calculation, and it's 63,000 kilograms worth of passenger weight onto that aircraft. Now, that's well over an yeah, I blank out sometimes. Anyway, so that's 63 tons of passenger weight. Now, taking an equally conservative figure of 20 kilograms of luggage weight per passenger, and let's face it, I myself have been a passenger on board many aircraft in the past, and I do plan to do so as soon as we're out of the coronavirus pandemic. We're cheeky little fellas, and we grumble that we're forced to settle for low capacities. Forced to settle for 20 kilograms allowances, or else you have to pay extra. But basically that's a conservative figure. So, but actual cargo weight will tend to be even more than that. But yeah, let's assume that every passenger brings on board about 20 kilograms worth of cargo. That's another 18,000 kilograms. Okay, another 18 tons. So here we're talking about 81. Did I do the calculation correctly? 81,000 kilograms. So 81 tons of passenger and cargo onto this aircraft. Okay. Add to that other extras such as food, beverage, and even plumbing water. That's no, you don't get plumbing water on aircraft because they use a vacuum system to, a vacuum pump to. Yeah. But they do have a water reservoir, a small water reservoir where all that stuff, all the undesirable stuff goes. It's also treated with chemicals that help neutralize odors and stuff. Anyway, so yeah, basically what I'm getting to is that if this guy is impressed at just fuel weight, well, there's more and more and more weight to add to it, and yet the aircraft still flies. Now, it's not a hoax, okay? There's no hoax in that, and the fact is that the aircraft's construction, as well as the aircraft's engines, make it possible for the aircraft to lift off the ground. What am I getting to? It's basically the reason why I have this schematic here on the screen, and why I've kept it all this time. Okay, if you look at it, okay, you'll see that the A380 has quite a huge wing area, apart from having quite a large wingspan too. Now, it's no secret, it is simple physics. If you want to get something to lift off the ground, you need to generate enough lift, and the way to generate lift on an aircraft is via the use of wings. Okay, and it goes to follow that the heavier the object that you're trying to lift off the ground, the more area you need, to generate more lift, because the larger the wing area, the more lift it generates. Okay, this is something that's been known all the way since basically the early days of flight. Is the reason why, for example, if you think about World War I aircraft, such as the Fokker triplane, the Sopwith Camel, and more and more aircraft of that era, you'll find that they will have either two wings, they're known as biplanes, or even a set of three wings. Sorry, not three sets. A set of three wings, such as in the triplane. And the reason for that was because those aircraft had they were light to start off with, but one wing just wouldn't cut it. It might be enough to generate lift to get the aircraft off the ground, but it would not generate enough lift to support the aircraft's activity once it's off the ground. And let's face it, they were fighter aircraft. They were intended to gain a bit of an edge on their opponents by maneuvering a lot. So if a single wing will only be good to get you off the ground, that's of no real good use for you. So to improve on that, or to counter that problem, you add more wings. They generate more lift, and they allow you to do more than just simply getting off the ground. So that was the first solution back then, and I mentioned that those aircraft were already light, but a crucial problem that they did have was that they had rather weak engines. When you think about it, their propeller engines, they didn't generate a considerable amount of power, of thrust. So engine power on its own just wasn't going to cut it anyway. And the problem was that developing more powerful engines back then required a lot of time, a lot of research, a lot of testing. Basically there was no time to do that, and they wanted to have aircraft out fast. So when you need to find a fast solution, you go for the simplest of them. And when you think about it, it makes much more sense to just strap on more wings to get more lift, rather than have to wait until a better, more powerful engine is available. Makes perfect sense, no? And then that's how they got the whole thing going. Fast forward to modern day, and nowadays with well over centuries of experience in flight, we now understand that you can achieve the same effect with one wing, just making it wider, larger. Okay, and not just that. Another thing that allows us to go for one wing only is the fact that we are no longer constructing planes out of wooden frames, covered in leather, as World War I planes were. But we are constructing aircraft out of the most widely used material is aviation grade aluminium, but nowadays we're even seeing composite materials being used, things such as carbon fiber, Kevlar, etc., etc. The idea being that using these composite materials, which are lighter but equally strong, if not even stronger, it allows the whole aircraft build to be even lighter. Okay, so we are compensating for the weight problem by making the aircraft's construction itself very light, which in turn makes it possible to build even bigger. Okay, and by making it possible to build even bigger, I mean building bigger and not incur a heavy penalty in fuel consumption for it. Okay. Now I mentioned earlier that another ingredient in making this beast able to get off the ground is the engines themselves. Okay, the engines generate a whole lot of power. More than that, it has 4 of them, not just 2. I mean, it is possible to go for 2 engines only. You would need to maybe elongate the landing gear a bit more in order to make those engines larger, and making them capable to take in more air and also push from the back a larger volume of air as well. Okay, generating more thrust. Basically, to start wrapping it up, it doesn't matter how big, how much weight your aircraft has. I mean, in a not so technical, not so strict sense, there's no limit to the weight you can put. I mean, you know, if 300 tons is a very large figure for you, you know, you can go for 1,000,000 tons. Still, if you can generate enough lift, you will get even that off the ground. Okay, and thankfully the Airbus A380 in this case is designed to achieve just that. Okay. Sure, I could bore you out with statistical data, and yeah, it's out there, available for everyone, so you know, there's nothing hidden in it. But yeah, people, just do your homework, okay? And if you don't understand physics, do try to get someone to explain that to you. Okay, don't just come up with your own false assumptions. You know, don't just wander off with your imagination and come up with unrealistic or senseless ideas about how the world around us, well, the universe, for that matter, functions. Okay, and I presume, although it wasn't completely implied, but I presume that the reason why our conspiracy theorist here went for the idea that fuel is a hoax. I mean, Creaky Blinder did a wonderful job of explaining how the ticket pricing really doesn't account for fuel alone. Okay, fuel in fact is only a small part of that ticket price. So yeah, Creaky Blinder did an excellent job in explaining it from that aspect. I explained it from the more operational aspect, and I, you know, before I conclude this video, I want to go to the last part of Creaky Blinder's video, which let's see, no, yeah, just one more. Oh yeah, there we have it. It's somewhere around here. Sorry, Creaky. Oh yeah, there it is. Let's just hear this part.
It actually takes to fill an A380's fuel tanks. So will that do you?
Now let's watch how compressed air ejected at force into ordinary air reacts. This is an experiment that anyone can do at home. You compress air inside a plastic bottle, pop open the top, and see the result: water vapor. This is what is happening when the jet engines are in cruise mode. They are running purely on compressed air, and the contrails are water vapor being ejected out from the engines.
Contrails. I'm happy that this guy isn't mentioning chemtrails. Okay? When it comes to passenger aircraft, that's for sure, they're not chemtrails. Okay? It's not, I'm not going to say that's a silly idea, because it's not, because actual chemtrails do exist, just not in the way that you conspiracy theorists so much love to evangelize about. Okay? No, these are contrails. Okay? They are, which is in short for condensation trails. Sure. If you compress air, water vapor will result. As a result of all that interaction and stuff. It's it's a bit of physics for you there, which basically, due to compression, what you end up doing is that you separate. Well, I say separate, but actually you're forcing the molecules tighter together, and what will happen is that air is not completely dry. There is some water in it, and all that water will tend to clump together, starting to form vapor. Once you let that pressure out, the vapor will come out. But what this guy gets wrong is that contrails are the result of compressed air inside the engines. And while he's not completely wrong about that, because there is compressed air in the engines, it's not. And before you go, aha, there you go. No, no, it's not an aha moment. There is compressed air, but it doesn't do much in the way of generating lift. The little compressed air that's available to the aircraft, which is ironically generated by the engines themselves. Okay, in any aircraft, you get, apart from the engines. Okay, so let's say the A380, it has 4 engines, and then it has a 5th engine. Where's that 5th engine, you ask? Well, it's right here in the back. It's called the APU. Okay, it's a very small engine. It doesn't do much. It doesn't generate lift. What it does it generates just enough power to power up the aircraft's electrics, electrical circuits, as well as generating pressure, both hydraulic and air pressure. Yeah, it's hot. It's very hot. When the aircraft has its main engines turned off on the ground. Okay, it doesn't make sense to keep the APU running while in flight, because that would be extra fuel consumption. And you're already getting the power and the hydraulic pressure that you need from the engine intake. So yeah, it becomes redundant then. But it's very useful on the ground. Okay, so to start up the engines, you use compressed air from the APU that gets them spinning. Okay, it gets them spinning just enough for when the fuel is pumped in. Once the fuel is pumped in and ignited, the reaction from that ignition starts getting the engines spinning, and it keeps them spinning, for the duration of the flight. Basically, as long as you're supplying fuel, the engines are spinning, and the more fuel you supply, the more combustion you will get, and therefore the more power you will get from those engines. Basically, it's the same concept as with as with a piston engine, except that it's a jet. The layout is different, but the concept is basically more or less the same. More fuel equals more power. And you're not going to get that with air pressure alone. Again, compressed air is supplied to the engines at startup. Okay, by the APU, and in a very little amount, just enough to get the turbines spinning. I said engines before. Turbines is what I meant. In flight, the engines themselves, part of the air that's sucked in by the engines is compressed and used to to do a lot of things, from keeping hydraulic systems pressurized to even supplying cool air inside the aircraft, air conditioning basically. As well, part of that compressed air is also used in the engines, okay, to keep them running as well, okay. But the actual operation of the turbine engines takes place by the fuel being burned in order to accelerate the spinning of the turbines more, in order to compress more and more engine, more compressed engine, more compressed air that's pushed out the back will generate more thrust, and thrust is what you need to obtain lift, and lift will get whatever you're trying to lifting up, as long as you can generate enough of it. Okay, so I guess I have more or less answered this from a more, well, I'm not going to say technical, because I'm not really that technical. I mean, I'm not in real life, I'm not an aircraft pilot, I'm not an aircraft engineer, I'm not an aircraft designer. I am a flight simmer. So yeah, I do have, I am quite an enthusiast about aircraft, and I, for one, can tell that contrails are not the result of compressed air coming out the back, because you only see that at a certain altitude. Contrails are the result of hot gases, most of it being just hot air, okay. The engine exhaust, hot gases being expelled out the back, expanding into extremely cold air, and immediately causing whatever moisture is in the air to condense, okay. That's why you get contrails, and the reason why you only get them at a certain altitude, it's because you need the air outside to be cold enough, okay. At tropospheric levels, basically, ground level, at sea level, temperatures are quite hot, okay. They tend to be around 30 degrees, in certain regions of this planet. They soar up to 40 degrees centigrade. Yeah, it's all in centigrade, Celsius, okay. But the higher up you go, the colder it gets. At cruising level, at about 30,000 feet or so, temperatures drop down to minus 50, even somewhere in the region of minus 60. So that's very cold, and fertile. I'm not going to say ground, fertile air. Well, let's go with the metaphor. Fertile ground for condensation to happen quite happily. I mean, that's the reason why you see clouds. Okay, it's warm air rising up, containing humidity. That humidity hits that seriously cold band in the atmosphere, causing it to condense, forming clouds. So I mean, contrails are not that different from clouds. Okay, so this time for reals, I've concluded this video here. Apologies to Creaky Blinder if I messed up his video, but yeah, I'm not that much of an expert in video editing, so yeah. And I'm also having trouble of my own with webcam editing software too, so yeah, I think a lot of apologies are in order, but yeah, that might be for another time. Anyways, stay safe, everyone. Happy flights and happy landings to those of you who love flight simming. I will see you for normal live streaming. Who am I kidding? I never keep my dates. I'll see you when I upload next. Okay. Have a good one.